everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and... it's so hot. A writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. It is 100 degrees here. I had to turn the fan off to do this intro. I'm going to keep this very quick. How is everyone out there? How is everyone? Are you also... Are you slow on the edge of heat stroke? Oh boy. Okay, wonderful episode today. This is Dylan Bizhikiins Jennings. If you don't know who Dylan is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Stevens Point, Wisconsin, Dylan is an enrolled member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. As an academic, he received his master's from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and is currently completing his PhD. He's also on the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board and is Associate Director of the Sigurd Olson Environmental Institute at Northland College. Quite a pedigree. As a musician, Dylan began singing at powwows when he was a kid, in drum groups like Midnight Express and Iron Boy, with fellow singer Joe Rainey. Former guest, that was a good episode. But it wasn't until 2015 when he and Joe were given free rein to do what they wanted at the Eau Claire Festival that Bizhikiins was born. Their first album, Unbound, was just released on Jack Jaguar in July, and folks, it's great. Yeah, I had Joe on last year, I think, maybe the year before, and it was a really good talk. And then I heard this new album, and I was like, oh, not only is it a good album, but Dylan's an academic. And I love talking to academics to see why are they still academics? What happened? If you don't know, listeners, I used to be a philosophy professor. Absolutely hated most of academia. I found it to be very limiting, not interested in, especially academic philosophy in America, not interested in looking at anything that deviated from the status quo at all. And when I say deviated from the status quo here, I mean things that are normal in European countries. I won't go into, folks. I don't think you want to hear me complain about academic philosophy here in this intro. Also, I am sweating so much, and the fan has only been off for a couple minutes. But I'm always fascinated by other academics and how they've been able to navigate a system that has become more and more corporatized over time. And the thing is, even though I work in a extremely corporate, I work in Hollywood, an extremely corporate context now, I can deal with that and I can navigate that so much easier in order to write comedy or make a podcast or something like that than I could to write a paper about Aristotle and truth or Heidegger or whatever. Anyway, Dylan is a very thoughtful, very empathetic person, and I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you like this. You should listen to Unbound. Great album. Okay, coming up on the show, just a little peek into some of the episodes coming up. Angry Black Men, wonderful talk. Their latest album, also great. Los Bichos, Rose Melberg of the Softies. Yesterday, I just talked to Roy Montgomery, brilliant guitarist, composer from New Zealand. We had an absolutely fascinating talk, so stay tuned for all of those. But for now, stay cool, everyone, and let's talk to Dylan. I'm almost interested in talking to you as much for your academic history as for your artistic history, because I used to be a philosophy professor. And so I'm interested in talking to you. You're working on your PhD right now, or have you already defended?
I'm getting close to hopefully defending either in the fall or the spring, whatever happens though, you know.
No, I don't, because I stopped right before my dissertation because I was just like I was doing it back in like the mid-aughts, and it was getting pretty corporate then. Like the philosophy department I was in had to quote unquote rebrand the undergrad as a pre-law program because the administration was just like, who gives a shit about philosophy? Come up with some reason why we fund you.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, well, is it still like that?
probably like that in most places. It's unfortunate, that the beast or the corporate kind of beast that gets involved or is in every single industry and every single entity, in some way, shape, or form. So, it's like it's can never escape capitalism. I feel that too.
Well, what's your discipline, and what's in addition to that? What are you writing your dissertation on?
It's in the Environment and Resources PhD program at UW-Madison. Yep. So my particular topic is focused on the environmental history of tobacco. Basically, its relationship with indigenous communities, and then basically tobacco's colonization, right, and reappropriation, and what it does today. How it got to that point.
Right. So, like, going from, I mean, what would it have been? And I read John Barth, The Sotweed Factor, so I kind of know about it in the 1600s or something like that. But and 1600s in terms of like Europeans coming over to cultivate it. But how does it become the commodified drug it became in, I guess, the 1900s or so?
Yeah, I mean, well, going from kind of a sacred, relative of ours, because very much in our language we consider it to be animate, right? So from animacy to, I guess, doing everything from perpetuating slavery to expanding on extreme capitalism, right? It does basically the opposite side of the spectrum from what indigenous communities had used it for and had a relationship with it for, right? And so, you figure it really, really quickly took off and was used for kind of the exact opposite of what our communities had used them for. So, and that's really what it focuses on. And then to even today, right? What I argue too, and look at the history, is like a lot of our indigenous communities are undergoing great change, exploitation, assimilation, all these things, especially throughout the 1800s, as these large tobacco conglomerates and corporations start taking root in the United States. And so, there's really interesting correlation there.
When you say our, do you mean in terms of, like, say, pan-native, or do you mean Ojibwe specifically?
More pan-native. There's a lot of native communities that have utilized or had a relationship with tobacco. I'm not saying all communities, but a lot.
Does it play the same role in those communities, like, or analogous roles at the very least?
Sometimes. I think that's a very complicated question itself, right? Depending on where you go, could be very similar, and in other cases, not so much.
For Ojibwe, what role did it play prior to a European settler colonialism?
Yeah, I mean, like, to us, some of our earliest stories talk about tobacco being a being, or like a relative of ours, and then eventually manifesting as a plant being. And so, so it played a role in every single one of our ceremonies, our cultural gatherings, our practices, everything. And then, unfortunately, due to colonization, assimilation, all of these practices, eventually there's a period of time where you start seeing commercial tobacco very much heavily present in a lot of our doings and our practices, and then our own people depending upon commercial tobacco as kind of like a substitute for traditional tobacco.
When you say, sorry, I was thinking about, like, in kind of like European philosophy in the 1900s, really, you start to get this understanding of morality as, like, morality, like, in European philosophy starts off like, you have this, like, circle of, like, care. And then the idea is, well, we'll keep expanding the circle of care to include more and more people. And then at some point in the 1900s, you get to this space where it's like, well, we should include objects or the environment or something like that, which seems to me just getting back to a point that was obliterated by settler colonialism. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah. There's this native doctor that I can't remember if he was from Pine Ridge. He was a chum of mine from a while back that made that kind of statement in a presentation multiple times, like, back here, the beginning of time, when you have sicknesses, right? You have, here, eat this root, and then you get through kind of the medieval times. It's like, here, that root is heathen, take this potion or take this elixir, right? And then, moving through, more modern times, you have, here, don't take those elixirs or potions, right? That's that's also heathen. Here, take this antibiotic, right? And then, you have, here in the present time, you have a lot of people now going, hey, eat this root, this is how you address this sickness, right? And that's exactly, it's exactly how I think a lot of our communities feel is, a lot of our communities had answers or really solid responses to working and living with our environments, but oftentimes very much not listened to.
Almost as if European whites destroyed all of these communities around the world, replaced it with their dog shit culture and knowledge, and then that's failing, and people are responding to that now. Weird. What a weird thing that's happened over the last 500 years.
Yeah, I mean it's always a fascinating thing to think about. I try to approach that topic with some kind of level of understanding and respect, and that there's probably some benefit in there that emerged or happened from communities hopefully trying to coexist, live together. But for the most part, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of replacer. There was a lot of kind of, I would guess, just outright assimilation that was pretty damaging, I think.
So I mean, this is something that I think about a lot too on the show. It's like, well, how do you, in this kind of like culture that we're all in, how do you retain a sense of self?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, we stay really busy in our communities up north. There's never a dull moment. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of cultural things going on. A lot of positivity too, and so it's like when you're grounded and you're kind of busy with a lot of those like more community oriented things or just whatever it is, it's really, I think it's easy to stay close to identity. It's easy to stay close to, like who you are, maintain your values. I don't know who I would be if I was living somewhere else or if I wasn't, in my community. That makes sense.
I mean, when you were growing up, I was reading, I mean, you had a pretty close connection with your community.
Yeah. Like my grandmother was very big on that. Like, so, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. Like, that's like my hero, my icon, right? Like, she's just means the world to me. And she was always a big one on exposing me to, our ceremonies, our practices, all of these things. Like, she'd also be one that was just like, very unapologetically, Ojibwe. So she just like, I was a young boy, get up, you're going ricing this morning with your cousin, get up, and sent me out the door with a lunch. And I was, this is what we do. Right. And so like, I think that, for her, like she always seen that as her role. Like, I gotta raise these boys, to be good Ojibwe men, and to make sure that they're connected and make sure that, they have a sense of community. And so, she was living around the Lac du Flambeau Reservation when I was really young. And then we eventually had to move away to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, where both my parents ended up finding jobs. And, they were young, straight out of high school, just had graduated high school when they had me. And so, they found work at Stevens Point, and then we were kind of in between the reservations at times, and then as I was getting older, spent a lot of time in Lac du Flambeau, Bad River, and Le Coudray as well, where I got to learn how to sing and, do a lot of different things, attended different ceremonial doings. But like I said, a lot of that to do with my grandmother being very intentional about that.
Was this meaningful to you when you were a kid, or was it, I mean, I ask this like no matter what people are raised in, if like they're going to church or something like that, I'm curious if it's like a meaningful thing or if it is like, well, I have to do this.
Yeah, I think it very much was meaningful. Like I always just wanted to be where my grandmother was which might be weird to people these days. Like, like I always like grew up watching like TV shows or like, what's that old school show where the babysitter passes away, right? Like nobody wants to hang out with the old lady, or it's taboo to like, go to your grandma and grandpa's, and it's like, the scary music in the background. Like no one wants to spend their summers there. It was very much like the opposite for me. Like that's where I wanted to be. Like, and so any kind of experience, or time up north with my grandmother was what I wanted to be doing. And because usually with her it was always like we get to go to powwows. We're going to, go sing at the drum group. We're going to ceremonies. We're going, she also worked with the natural resources department for the tribe in Bad River as I got older. And so her job was literally like got to go take water quality samples from the river and from these different sample points. And so it meant we get to go dig in the woods and go find frogs and turtles. And she also would get to go like check eagles' nests, out in the sloughs. And like, I thought that was like you can get paid to do this kind of work, kind of deal, So that was like super meaningful to me. And I think even at a young age, I knew like, this is where I want to be. This is, I got to be close to my grandmother.
Yeah. What did your parents do? Like what brought them to Stevens Point?
My dad at an early age, he was, what did he do? He worked a lot of like odd jobs, just to kind of keep food on the table. And so he worked as like a bread delivery man for a while there. Mm-hmm. My mom, early on got a job doing like computer work, and wanted to go to school to be, I think, like a computer programmer. But she worked for like maybe an insurance agency or some other kind of like. I just knew she worked on computers, and that's what she did at a very young age.
Do you know if they had ambitions, or was their focus like having a family?
Yeah, my dad, I think, as they were getting older, my dad, I think, wanted to go out east and go to culinary school. And my mom, I think, wanted to go to school out east as well, like maybe Dartmouth or one of those schools. She was really, really smart, I guess. She's still very smart, but that's what, everyone always tells me at a young age. She was really like extremely, extremely intelligent, loved reading, loved everything about computers, books, like the whole 9 yards. She's just very, very intelligent. And so, but I think having me kind of put the kibosh to a lot of those plans. And so, they decided to try to make something work and started jobs and started a family.
Yeah. Did you have siblings?
I have one younger brother. Yes.
So what was like the household like when you were growing up?
My earliest memories, we were in like a really small, like maybe one bedroom apartment. And then eventually, in a different, small living quarter somewhere down there in Stevens Point. We also bounced around to different places. And I eventually, my brother's 3 years younger. And so we eventually, I think my family both found jobs in Wausau, Wisconsin. And so made the move and transitioned to Wausau, which is only like, I don't know, like half hour, 40 minutes north. And from there, we lived in, just kind of like this couple duplexes. And I remember a lot of good positivity when we were kids. My parents, would, do anything for us, and I think, we grew up in poverty at a young age and didn't know it, right? Because they did such a good job, like just keeping food on the table and making sure that we had everything that we needed. So, you don't even realize that. And a lot of people say that back at home too. Like you might grow up poor, but you don't even know that you're poor because you feel like you have everything that you need plus more.
Did they want you to have connections to the Bad River community, or was that primarily through your grandmother? Or did they encourage? Did they like bring you places?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta understand, like every year it wasn't like, we just had no connections to Bad River. I mean, every year we were up there for different junctures, different times of the year. We have an annual powwow up there. So we were up there every year for the powwow. Every summer we'd go spend summers with my grandmother usually. So we'd be up in Bad River in the summertime. And then, seasonal things, birthdays, all that kind of stuff. My mom would always make the trek north so that we'd be up there and be around, all of our family was up there as well. So
Do you start having academic ambitions at all? Or, is it primarily like seeing your grandmother and being like, oh, wait, I could do this, and I want to at least work with the environment? Like, what is happening like when you're young in your brain?
Yeah, I know I want to be outside. I know I want to do something natural resources based. Like that's what my internal desires were at that point, was like, that's what I want to do with my life. Like I want to do something outdoor, something with natural resources. And I know I want to help my community somehow. Like that's something I wanted to do.
Yeah. Like what decade is this? Is it the 90s?
Yeah.
Like I think you're like younger than me, but
yeah. I was born in 92. So, okay. in the throughout the 90s. Yeah.
Because the thing, when I ask people younger than me about what they want to do, and you're not, I think this is probably is more like a Gen Z type thing, seeing kind of like as dystopia descends upon all of us like a vampire. I'm like, it's really, the last 4 years has kind of changed the calculus in my brain, where before I was very much, it's not that I don't want to make things, but that it's very much tempered now, where it's like, well, I do want to make things, but like maybe the things that I thought were important, like awards or whatever, right, are not so much important anymore. And now there's this morality that's entered into this where I'm like, well, maybe I need to spend more of my time caring for people and caring for the environment. And specifically what I was thinking with you was like, well, as climate change gets markedly worse, right? What does it mean to you to work with the environment? Like, is there more of an urgency to do things on a bigger scale? Because for me, it's more like, well, I'll do less showbiz shit and more working with the community. But you're already working in a field where, the environment is paramount. And so like, what has the, like, what has it changed the calculus in your head? What has it done? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. I mean, I think that type of thinking has always just been prevalent in my mind. Like, that's always been like the utmost importance is like, what's going on with the seasons, what's going on with, with climate change, what's going on with, all of these intricate interactions that you see in between the environment. And so like, I think about that a lot. And that's been kind of a part of my mindset for a really long time. Especially when you see a lot of our communities, really have these strong connections to our environments, and, they're just, our way of life, our teachings, and the environment are all inextricably connected and interwoven. Right. And so there's no separation. And so it's like, without certain practices tied to the environment, like, harvesting wild rice, and all the teachings and the language and the culture that's all connected to that, that's really important. And so, I definitely think about that. I think that our communities especially are, most impacted by these types of environmental changes that you might be hearing about or seeing, right? And it's not like, something's going on, out in the Atlantic and it's impacting fish, and therefore, the price of salmon at the grocery store goes up a couple bucks, right? And that's the impact that you see for us. Like, it's like we're here, we have these relationships with these beings or resources, and, any kind of disruption to that can be catastrophic for us, for our worldview, for our life way. Does that make sense?
I mean, I was thinking as you were talking, there is something where there are two very different conceptual schemes that you are brought up with. And I'm curious how you navigate those, right? Where there is one where the environment is a sacred living part of life. And then this like, European capitalist point of view where it is just a thing to be exploited for profit. And I'm curious about how, at what point were you aware of these two different ways of thinking? How do you navigate them? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, pretty early on, I mean, I feel like, very cognizant to like, you know, the different needs of all of our different communities as well. You know, like, I recognize that even though, you know, I might center myself in an indigenous community, that, you know, we might not have the same values, practices, traditions, or beliefs, you know, as the community next door or the community down the road or downstate. But I was always taught to just try and be respectful, you know, of other people's ways. And sometimes there's intersections that are inevitable that cause friction and you know, cause issue. And, you know, you might have to take a really strong stance in the dirt and hold your ground. But like, you know, personally, you know, I was very cognizant of that at an early age, that, you know, capitalism, extraction, you know, all of these other types of practices, that some people live by and center their lives around, you know, very much differs from how we center our lives, you know. And then I also recognizing too that, you know, that sometimes people have to grapple with living between both, right? And kind of that we're all somehow dependent on the system as well. You know, like you can't escape that, you know, that it's, you know, just like our communities, you know, we're assimilated and kind of compelled or forced to live in the society. You know, it's the same way. We're just kind of part of the system, but also still a voice of reason, also still a voice of like trying to retain and save whatever we can, you know.
You seem remarkably kind and empathetic in a way that I have trouble accessing, because when I think about this, like you were talking, I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I'm grinding my teeth. Like the resentment I feel over living in this commodified world is so molecular for me that I really have trouble overcoming it. And I'm really curious how you are able to emotionally deal with this stuff, because it is the anger goes so deep to the core of me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not immune to that as well. Right. There are times where, you know, it's been very difficult to work with certain entities or to work with folks that really have no, you know, no intention of any kind of compromise, right? Or no intention of kind of reaching across and trying to understand our worldview. And that can be pretty maddening too. But, you know, like I have this great grandfather, his name was Raymond Madej, and he was a really, really gentle, kind-hearted spirit. And I always just try to channel my inner Ray, you know. And he was such a giving and caring individual and an iconic figure in our community. And so I just try to be like him, right? Like, well, how would he handle this case, this scenario, this situation? And, you know, with a lot of empathy, with a lot of compassion. I also think that, you know, sometimes in my experience working with folks, you know, sometimes they want to get a rise out of you and they want to see you angry and they want to, you know, get into it with you. Probably what bugs them the most when you show them that empathy and love and you're like, hey man, you know, I'm in a good mood today and I love you. You can be crabby at me, you can be mean, you can say whatever, but you're not going to ruin these vibes, because these vibes are powerful and strong. So, you know.
Yeah. Are you a therapy person at all? Or is this really just like, you know, you kind of seem just like naturally, or you were raised in a very like even keeled way?
I wouldn't even say that. I mean, I've definitely gone to therapy and, you know, over the years too, to just process and work through a lot of things. I think everybody should, you know, at some point. But, you know, I think that I've had a lot of really, really great teachers and folks that have kind of coached me through with empathy and compassion, that, you know, and don't get me wrong, right? Like you might run into me on a bad day, right? And they're like, who the hell is this guy? You know, but this, you know, that's the type of vibe I try to leave for my children, for, you know, our future generations. Just that kind of way of working with folks.
Yeah. Were you this compassionate when you were a kid, or is this just something you've gained in your adulthood as you have kind of matured?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. You'd have to interview my mother on that one. I mean, I would like to say yes, but who knows? You know, maybe not as much.
Like, do you remember being kind to other people, or did you react negatively towards shitheads?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I was always pretty kind as a kid. Yeah, I think that's something that's always been a part of me is like even when I was in leadership positions, I'd always think about how decisions would impact people, right? And like, try to put myself in somebody else's shoes. And, I think that's just been how I've been my whole life. Like always like worrying about other people, not necessarily, even if something had nothing to do with me or doesn't impact me, I'd still worry about other people somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I remember when I was a kid, I mean, to this day, but like, even as a kid, I was really keyed into injustice. And anytime it felt like there was something that was unjust, it got to me and I would push back against it. So like even another kid just being like an asshole or something like that, I'm like, well, there's no need to that. So I would be an asshole back to them as opposed to just like, oh, well, whatever. Like you come from a bad household, or maybe you're just genetically a piece of shit. I don't know, whatever. Like, but like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like as a kid, like it got to me in a way where I'm like, wait, because I think I was raised with this idea that the world should be just. And then when I actually entered the world and I was just like, oh God, it's not in any way.
Yeah.
I felt, and I'm talking about as a child, not even as like, it wasn't like as an adult, suddenly the scales fell from my eyes. It was that as a child, I was just like, oh, this is like like there's justice in like small proportions here and there, but really it's mostly just like, parasites like feeding off of our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely felt certain ways too at points in time for sure.
Yeah. But you were able to, but this is what I find interesting is you were able to overcome those feelings with kindness and compassion. And I'm curious how you were able to do that as a kid, maybe, or as a teenager, pre-therapy, let's say. Was it just feeling this spirit that like, because I think back, I'm like, I'm disconnected from America in a way, because my family came over in the early 1900s, like fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe. And I feel dislocated. Like I don't have I guess Eastern Europe, but then it was all, Holocausted away. So like, I don't even feel connected to there. Yeah. And I certainly obviously don't feel connected to Israel. So it's just like, I don't feel, whereas like you have a connection to the land you grew up in that goes back thousands of years. And I'm wondering, is it that grounding? I don't know. I'm just throwing something out.
I was raised by a lot of like aunties and a lot of really strong matriarchal figures, not just my grandmother, but, my dad was always there, but like a lot of like, I think life teachings that I've gotten were all, when I think back on it, a lot of them were given by women in our family at a young age. The aunties at our ceremonies, or, my biological aunties. It was just, a lot of that, and really powerful women leading, in a way that was, I guess, conducive to learning empathy, compassion, and respect, and so like, even to this day, when those women in our community talk, like, it's like, you need to stop what you're doing and listen, and so, it's kind of probably, I would probably credit some of that to them, just like that powerful presence in my life at an early age. And just kind of how they conducted themselves and worked through and try to work with people, and try to see the best in people. And, my mom and my grandmother were always very like, they're always like ones that always forced you to think about things like, when we were kids, that was one thing, it always remind us that, some families don't even, don't have enough resources or means to have a house, right? You should be grateful that you have a place to lay down every night, and, or even food, or toys, and like things like that. Like, always very well reminding us that, there are people, even in our own communities, that don't have much, but they're still happy and still okay and still doing well. And so, I kind of always grew up with that, like try not to be, some kind of way, or try to be really grateful for what you do have.
Do you think that's very just particular to your family, to your community, to Ojibwe culture? Like, I'm trying to like get a sense of like, do you think this is a larger thing? Do you think this is a thing that's like more particular to like your family or community? This idea of like embedding empathy at the core of existence.
I think empathy is embedded even in our language and how we talk to one another in our Ojibwe language. I really do. I think that there are just more delicate, intricate, and empathetic ways of working with one another, kind of in this cultural continuum versus like how English can be very harsh and rigid, right? And even like the words themselves, right? The way you articulate things or the way that you say something to somebody can hurt, right? It can be kind of sharp, like I feel like our language and maybe a lot of other indigenous languages have, empathy wrapped up into how you communicate with people. Right. And so I think on one level, like, yeah, maybe that's exactly it. There's, a little bit more empathy kind of just embedded in our cultural structure. I don't know.
Is there an example you can give of Ojibwe Moan that shows that versus kind of like, because there is this kind of like waspiness to English, right? In a way that's like you said, sharp, where it is very much businesslike. And, you have to really be on the outskirts of it to start playing with language. I'm not saying that it's not like there's plenty of fun you can have in English, but I'm saying that like, it seems very much that it's been cauterized in the last couple hundred years in a way that stuff is in the margins. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't have a ton of examples, but I mean, I'd say like even in just our concepts and construction of, how we work with one another in our communities, and all these cultural constructs and I guess perceptions of life can be different, right? So like Gigawabaman is, one of the words you hear in one of our songs, even Gigawabaman, people equate it to like goodbye, right? And so goodbye in the English language, I suppose, means just that, like
it's utilitarian. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Gigawabaman literally means like, till I see you again, right? Or see you. Kind of there's kind of the connotation that you're gonna cross paths again versus like a final goodbye or like a cut and dry, like peace, I'll probably never see you again, like even in how we greet each other like that and say Gigawabaman, it's kind of like we know we're going to see each other again. There's no need for goodbye, right?
So this is interesting. Bringing this up then, when do you start singing in powwows?
At a pretty young age. Like I said, traveling to powwows was a big thing for, I think I started traveling to powwows with my grandmother when I was probably about 2 or 3. So at a very young age. And part of that was, seeing all the drum groups there, and like they were like, in my mind, they're like rock stars, the ones that help keep the powwows going, bring all the music to the circle like that. And so like I knew at a very young age, like that's what I wanted. And my grandparents had this old drum in their garage. So in the summertime, I'd go beat on that drum and, and learn how to keep a beat with it. And, and eventually, kind of start learning how to sing.
Do you have like an ambition? Like, is it possible to do that for a living? Do you have or is it just like, well, no, this is part of a, once a year, a couple times a year, we go to these powwows and then we can sing there. And then,
At that point in time, it wasn't an ambition to be part of a career. I loved it so much that I wished it could be, right? But like my mother was also very strict. And so she was like, you're also going to go get this Western education at some point in your life. Like she had kind of coached me to feel that way. Like, and I don't know if that, was because, she had, maybe, struggled through some of that in her life, or, having kids kind of prevented her from finishing off, her degree at an earlier age. And, she would go back and finish later on in life, which was amazing, but she was very much had in her head, like, you guys need to, wanted good things for us. Right. And she felt like that was the route forward. So that was kind of always like school was very important to her, and she made it important to us. And so I was like, yeah, we can go have our fun. And she did a lot to take us to Powell's and bring us places. But she'd be like, Powell's usually end Sunday evening, and then we'd have to travel all the way back home, which was hours of driving. And she'd be like, you're expected to get up for school early Monday morning, right? Like, so it was like literally from, that end to back to reality, right? Jump right back into school. And I remember like, sometimes being a kid, like being really, really tired, like, but still like full of energy, like having such a good weekend singing at the drum, like, so having energized, but like still feeling like, like I was worn out.
Yeah. Yes. No, I remember that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was always tired. I hated school. I didn't hate school. I liked learning. I hated the formal structures of school and being told I have to be there at 7:45 or 7:30 or something like that. Because I like to stay up. And it's not, I just said I like to stay up late. My body stays up late. So that's just, so fitting into a normal rhythm. My wife's a stand-up and an actor too. And we were talking yesterday, and we were saying about how, we've tried other jobs, and it's just that having some kind of flexibility in schedule just kind of fits our bodies in a way that, that kind of like the imposed like structures of a desk job or school really felt bad, and really kind of, in my mind, I don't know what this means, but in my mind was an Iron Maiden, like being put into an Iron Maiden and having it close with the spikes on you and stuff like that.
Yep.
Obviously, that's hyperbole. I know that's not, being an admin assistant at NYU was not the same thing as being put into an Iron Maiden, but like emotionally, it felt like that, right?
Yeah.
Did it feel like that to you too?
Yeah, I think so. I think I definitely vibed a lot better with college than school in general. It was just like a little bit constrictive, maybe a little bit oppressive too. Like, your whole day is planned out. This is what you're doing type deal. And then, going to school too, you really kind of, you look back to, you're like, how come I didn't get to learn how to do things that were, important in our culture in our school, right? Like, or important to like where I come from specifically, right? And that was also something that you grapple with as well. Like, hey, it's ricing season right now, but we're here sitting in a desk, or here, it's fishing season, we're sitting in a desk, sitting inside.
Hey, in Pennsylvania, the kids got off the first day of hunting to go hunting. If you could leave, I could only leave for the high holy days for Yom Kippur, so I could fast all day. But those kids got to go run in the woods and hunt deer. So I don't hold any resentment over these two different. That's what I mean. Some of this, like, it's not the same thing, obviously, but like, I grew up Jewish in a really Christian area, and I found it difficult to navigate these two things. I found it difficult to navigate the things I was being told at home or being taught in religious school, and the things I was taught to value in school, right? And it's not like it's that different. I mean, my family is European in some measure, but like it was still different enough. And that's why I was so curious, about, how you grew up, and like, cause I found it difficult to navigate. Right. But it seems like you had an easier time, or a somewhat easier time than me.
I definitely had difficulties, and like I said, and kind of getting back into the swing of things, or getting to go all these places in the weekends, and having these relationships, these friendships all over Indian country, right? And then kind of boom, right back into things. But like I said, my mom kind of made it that way, like, strict in that way. It was like, and was able to compromise with us, right? Where, some people don't have that in their lives, right? Where they have a little voice of reason over here, or somebody that's telling them or guiding them, like, hey man, like, secretly this is going to make your life a little bit easier, even though you don't like it right now. She was pretty real with us about that. And so yeah, had my struggles. And like I said, when I was a kid, every time I had to leave my grandmother or my uncle, I'd cry. not afraid to say that, like I did not want to leave her. Like I was like, got to leave her house, got to leave the community. Like I didn't care for that, so struggled with that over the years too,
Do you think that affects the path you want to take in life then? And you're like, well, I want something that will lead me back to this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of that desire to be back, in the community, to be around my grandmother, to be around some of our other extended relatives, our ceremonial family, everybody, I kind of yearned for that, it was like I needed that. And so I think I knew, that, eventually I probably was going to be moving back to the reservation or somewhere near it. That probably, especially at the time, probably limited what types of career ventures I'd go into, right? Like, you never know, especially back then, things weren't as flexible, not that I'm super old or anything, but right. Pre-pandemic, things are different, a lot less, remote options, a lot, kind of like the very rigid thinking office, whatever it is, so.
I was thinking too, like when you said, your mom was like, well, it's important to like be educated, go to school. I think a lot about how my parents' desires for a long time overwrote my own desires,
mm-hmm.
and how it was kind of a struggle for me to get out from under them. And I'm wondering if, like, how much did your own desires align with that, right? Because obviously you're an academic, so obviously you find some value in it. But also, I was an academic, and I hated this. I mean, at the core, what got to me was that I had to wait until I was tenured to write about the stuff I wanted to write about, and I wasn't willing to spend 10 years or more writing what they wanted me to write before
mm-hmm.
I could and who knows if I would even get. I mean, not tenure is like, you might as well find a bottle with a genie. That's the chance you have of finding a tenure track position. But like, I'm curious how much of your own existential will, your ambition aligned with what your mom wanted for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, I hadn't given college like a huge amount of thought when I was younger. I had seen, some of my friends, have had concrete plans to go certain places, right? And
mm-hmm.
so I personally didn't have like concrete plans like they had. Like, I'm going here and this is what I'm doing, right? And I wasn't even sure what all of my passions and interests in life, like what that could amount to and what I could do with that, right? Like, because I was also sought a degree eventually in like archaeology, anthropology, which really loved the archaeology aspect of it. Not a huge fan of the broad field of anthropology, especially being a Native person and like the kind of people that teach those courses and the terminology that's still utilized to this day. And, just...
I know I shouldn't be surprised, but I am that still in, the 21st century. It's retrograde, but...
Yeah. And so like, I've had people even in my own family like ask like, what are while I'm going to school, right? Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, where can you even get a job doing that, right? And
I remember
be
that
like,
question.
Yeah, I'd be like, I don't know, these are just things that interest me. And, so like, I feel like I had all these interests and passions and just like found other outlets and ways to kind of pursue some of those things, and I actually, have to thank my mom for kind of pushing me into those spaces, to, I guess to broaden my networks and relationships, because that's ultimately what that did too, right? Is like connected me to, kind of a greater sphere of folks, individuals, and experiences that I probably would have never had, if I didn't do that.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking, is singing something that, and I don't know if you can answer this. I don't know if anyone can answer this question that I'm about to ask, but I'll throw it out there anyway. The desire, is that the same strength, the same flavor of desire as learning, as being an academic? Is it something that you enjoy doing and you found meaning in, and now that you through Joe, it's something? I interviewed Joe like a year or two ago, and his path was different, and so like I'm curious about what the feeling was there. Was it something that like was then subordinated to academic work? Does that make sense?
They were just things that were just going on simultaneously, right? Like growing up singing, I knew I had a knack for it, and I had a lot of really good teachers. And so I just like kept doing it. Right. And even, we'd be singing for ceremonies, we'd be singing for funerals, we'd be singing for feasts, for community events, for powwows. And it was just like, it was what we did. It was like we were called on to do this or that. And it was just what we did. And you kind of always have like this kind of internal competition with yourself to be better, to be a better, stronger singer. And like, I don't know if any like people in other communities or other cultures like have to work through kind of the ins and outs of puberty, right? And singing through that. But like for us in our communities, that's always crazy time, where, like you start off as a young kid and you can sing, and especially in our style singing, you can sing really high, and you can flutter, you can fluctuate your voice from the mids to the lows to the highs, or at least to the mids and the highs. And when you start getting your next voice, it can really change, and that stops a lot of singers from stopping, especially in our communities. Like it's so hard to work through that. Might sound like a dying crow, and everyone's like, but like that's kind of like that point where I just like was like really determined to like work through some of that and continue singing. That's what all like the old timers will tell you, like just keep singing, don't give it up, because you start working your voice into a groove, into a rhythm, and start defining your adult voice. And so I kept doing that simultaneously, kind of on the school grind, and then eventually, started getting asked to go all over the place, sing all over the place. Like singing would start taking me all around the region, and then all around the country, and eventually all around the world. And that's when I kind of started recognizing like, there's might be something here.
Sorry, can you hear my dog coughing in the background?
Oh, I thought that was a hairball or something.
She has apparently small dogs get a larynx thing sometimes, and so she has to take medicine for it. You okay there, Mabel?
Oh, geez. Did they have dog inhalers for that kind of stuff?
No, it's like a little pill. Like she gets a little like hydrocodone pill, and then it relaxes her trachea. Sorry, it's trachea, not larynx. It relaxes her trachea, and so she doesn't get that.
Poor thing.
Like, can you hear that in the background?
Yeah, I never heard that before. That's very interesting. Was she a smoker or?
Yeah. Oh, well, she's vaping now. She's like,
okay, of course.
She's not. She. The doctor said maybe like she should lay off the nicotine. but the thing that I'm curious about is like, okay, so as you gain kind of prominence for singing, right? Like, how old are you about at this point?
Probably like a teenager. Start traveling more and more. Yeah.
How are you conceiving of what your path in life is going to be? Do you have a concrete? Because you seem like a thoughtful person, right? So I have to assume that you were at least thinking ahead. I was not at this time. I was like, well, I want to be a physicist. That was it. That's all I thought of at that point. Because I was good at science, and Jurassic Park, like Jeff Goldblum, really. I was like, oh, I want to do chaos theory.
Yeah.
But that was it. But I didn't have any kind of like broader thought. Did you were you like, well, I want to do this, I want to do, like, what were you thinking at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any specific I was actually at a point too when I was kind of teenager, getting ready to fly the coop, and just didn't really have an exact spot where I wanted to end up at that point. It was just like, no, I'm going through the kind of the channels that folks want me to go through, right? And I know that I'm still getting to go sing and practice and be a part of our drum groups, and so that kind of need and desire is being fed, and I'm just like going through life, like without really any kind of end in sight, just kind of rolling through. I didn't really like have any expectation, like if I make it to this point, I'm good in life. It was just like just working through these things and enjoying life, enjoying traveling. Yeah.
Are you someone who's generally present, or like I'm definitely an anxious person, so I'm constantly like the future is bearing down on me. But you
Hmm.
seem like you are someone who's fairly grounded in the present.
I like to be, but I can get anxious for sure. I know that, like, there are times, especially being a parent now too, like I definitely can get anxious. So,
Okay. So this,
yeah.
because sorry, sometimes when I talk to people who seem much more emotionally healthy than me, I'm always baffled, and I'm just like, how are you doing this? How are you able to stomach existence?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't have all the answers. Like I, have my good days, my bad days too. So
But even that answer, it's so emotionally well keeled that I'm like,
I
well,
think you just caught me on a good day, I think.
Because here's the thing. Okay. When you were talking a minute ago, I was thinking, I'm like, oh, what took precedence? Like, were you just like, I want to work in the environment. I loved going out with my grandmother. I want to work in the environment. What is the way that I can do this? Or was it that you were in school? You're like, I need, my mom said I need to go to school. I need to have a decent job. And I can work in the environment if I do X, Y, or Z. Which was the thinking you kind of had?
I honestly, when I was in college, I took a lot of different types of courses. So there were some, like a lot of the ecology, fish and wildlife ecology courses, environmental courses, um, that really, I ended up taking a lot. Like I had multiple semesters where I was overloaded in coursework. I think I graduated either at least a semester early, if not a year early, in my bachelor's program, because I was taking like 18 credit semesters.
Jeez.
And yeah, looking back, I don't know why I did that, but like I had a lot of interest, right? And I was also like really like, really like to get a degree in archaeology. Don't know what I'm going to do with it, but would like to try and do that. Also, environment sciences. I'd like to, do something in that realm. And then also kind of the American Indian Studies realm. They had a program there that I just figured, like, it'd be interesting, maybe, some things I could pick up on, some things I can learn. And so, I had those kind of three general outlets, was just start stacking up courses that seemed interesting to me, and not necessarily like, and I probably, in an attempt to just make sure I have options, like case this area doesn't work out very well for me, maybe I need to pivot to this area or to this area, but definitely, I had roommates that were like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. This is this field that I'm going to do. This is how many years of school I'm looking at. This is how many years of school I have funding for. And this is what I got to figure out on my own. Boom, like a set plan. Or had another roommate that was going to be an engineer, and by golly, that's what he did, and he became an engineer and was just like, boom. And, yeah, and then there was me that was like, I have no idea, but I think things will work out fine,
Well, when did it crystallize for you?
I mean, I don't know that it has.
Really?
Like I just like, I think I just started, I'm able to get like super hyper focused on specific areas and things and projects that I'm passionate about. And so like that drives me, I think, to get things done or to accomplish certain things. And so if I say I'm going to do something, like I usually would more than likely do it. And for some reason, like if people start telling me, man, you can't do that, like that, then like puts me into overdrive, and I'm like, I'm going to do this, I don't know if that works with you at all, where you're just like, any kind of outside noise or doubt is like, that's fuel,
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the center of my heart is resentment. Is when you said that, fuck you, I'm going to go against that.
Yeah.
Again, something I've dealt with in therapy. I feel like I'm coming off to you as the most hateful person, and I'm not. Just so.
Oh no, I don't get those vibes at all. No worries.
Good. We're getting towards the end, and I am curious too. Again, going back to you have these parallel desires, right? When do you get the idea of, well, I would like to do something more with singing. You know, I want to make an album or I want to tour, whatever, right? When does that become something that you want to do in parallel with your academic work, or however it
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when we started getting together to start working on music, I mean, the initial goal was not like we're gonna make an album here, or we're gonna make this music and tour all over with it. Like that was not for a lot of us. I think it was an outlet for addressing and dealing with grief. I had a couple big losses and in our circle, and there are a lot of things I was working through as a young parent, and so I mean, and we've shared that with each other before too. Like everyone was kind of in very similar space, and so it was an opportunity to like just get together and to put some good vibes out there in the universe, and to just explore some areas that we felt hadn't been explored very much. And so like it wasn't until a few years ago that it was like Sean and Brian. Sean and Brian are both like, you guys know we have like way more than enough for an album. Like, would you guys be open to that? And I was kind of like, sure. Like, what does that all entail? Like, let's see what we can do. And then we kind of started finiting things and really, really driving towards that. But it was never like out of like, I'm going to start touring. I'm going to start putting this out into, either self-promote, or it was literally like, we just had done this.
What I'm getting is that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your kind of existential journey, more than a choice necessarily, is more of an organic outgrowth of your life. Does that make sense? I said it, and then as I said it, I was just like, I don't even know if that makes sense, but like, that's what it feels like, the way that you're telling the story.
Kind of. I mean, it was just like, I especially at a younger age, didn't know that singing, and I don't know that a lot of people would consider that as like, like that you could do this kind of stuff if you wanted to do it, full time or, part time. Had never considered it to be like that for me in my life. Was just always like, being a singer to me was always like, you show up where you're asked to be and to help out where you're asked to help out, use your voice to help your people. And then anything else that you have time for, whether it's like singing contests or other things, like that's how you can spend your time. And that's fulfilling to me, and I was like, I'm still okay with that, like, but, to, I guess, just, you also recognize too, that not everybody likes our style of music too, or that it's not for everybody, like our style of singing. And that's why I think it's always been like categoricalized or put into a compartment over here, or put on a shelf over there, right? Where it's like, that's that Indian stuff that goes over there, right? Like, versus like, no, like that can be here, that can be in these spaces. And so that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, there is definitely, I mean, like in like indie or avant-garde circles, right? There was definitely this opening up that happened, I want to say late 90s or so, where where like, instead of there being like quote unquote world music, it was just like, well, no, we're going to include this singer in this genre that they're part of. Like, world music doesn't make sense, right? Or this, right? Or this music from Ghana is actually, here in pop music, as opposed to it being Ghanaian or whatever, right? And so I think definitely, I don't really listen to a ton of like stuff that's on the radio, so I can't really speak for that. But radio, Jesus. I know there is radio still, but like more like whatever Spotify makes a playlist of. But like, it seems like there has been more of an opening for music to be, instead of like, well, this is this specific culture. Sorry, the nerd voice. This is this specific culture, and this is this specific culture. It's more like, no, this is music, and here, listen.
Yeah.
To it. Yeah. Dylan, thank you for joining me today. How do you feel?
Yeah, feel pretty good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the good questions. I mean, I really like kind of the ability to kind of look back and kind of reflect. Sometimes we don't get the opportunity to do that. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thanks. It was lovely talking to you. I love the album a lot.
Well, we appreciate that. We appreciate the love and hope that your dog gets the medical care that he needs, or that he's all good. And yeah.
Thanks. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.